Having done a very good line drawing for my leaf, working on the front side, position it on a piece of drawing paper. And in order to see the line drawing better, although it does show up pretty well on the video, in real life it requires a little bit more opacity. Slip another piece of tracing paper underneath the original tracing and then transferred all of that onto my drawing paper. And what I'm going to do now is take this tracing off. In order to do the back, all I have to do is turn this over and it gives me a mirror image of my leaf, which is in fact the actual back of the leaf. And think about how you're placing it in relation to the front leaf. And then all you need to do is place your transfer paper underneath. And I'm ready to transfer the back side of the leaf to my drawing paper. Now that we have both sides of our leaf transferred, let's take a look at what we have to do to create the values for this drawing. I've taken photographs of this leaf. We have a front and we have a back. The two sides look very similar. But if we look at our leaf, you can see, if I flip this over to the other side, the underside is much lighter considerably than the front side. So you need to keep that in mind as you're working. What you should do is take photographs of your leaf, both the front side and the back side. Make sure you've lit it correctly and then convert them to black and white, which is what I've done here. You can tell, because of the way this is lit, where your shadows have to fall. So if you look at, this is the front of our leaf, you'll notice that because of the scientific lighting and the fact that the leaf has this feature, if you were to look at it at the end, a leaf generally does something like this. It curves, then on the front side the midrib will recess, and when you draw the next curve, you will have two mirror image convex curves. These curves represent the blade of the leaf. If our light is coming from this direction, we know that this area here is going to be in highlight and this area here is going to be in highlight. And because the leaf blade turns away from the light, we know that this area here is going to be in shadow and this area here is going to be in shadow. So if we look at the front of our leaf, that's basically what we're seeing here. This is our lighter area. The shadow area is along the curve of the blade as it goes into the midrib. And then on the opposite side, you'll see the highlight or the lighter area along the midrib, and then it goes darker as we get towards the outer edge of this right side of the blade. Now the opposite happens with the underside of the leaf. So instead of curving up like this, we now have a concave curve for the blade. And the midrib sits on top of that concave, and then it curves back in a concave fashion. So when the light hits it, what's happening is you're getting light on this side of the blade, and you're getting light on this side of the blade. So where it curves away from the light, this is going to be your darker area, this is going to be your darker area, and you will also have highlight on this part of the midrib, and you will have shadow on this part. And if we look at our photograph, that's basically what's happening here. Although this is a very flat blade, but you can see it's a little lighter on this side, and it's very dark on this side because of how deeply the midrib stands away from the blade. So that's how you know how you're going to have to shade this. Now, the second issue you're going to have is how to shade these secondary veins. In the case of the veins on this side, you can see where the highlight is coming. But the veins, again, even though it's on the underside of the leaf, the veins are still going to be lighter than the blade itself. And the same is true here. But here you'll see the shadow is on this side of the vein, on this side of the leaf. the shadow is on the opposite side of the vein. The highlight is on this side, the highlight is on this side. So they change depending on the side of the leaf that you're working on. On the front, you'll see, and particularly with this leaf, which has all kinds of tertiary veins, you'll notice that the secondary veins are still light, like the midrib, but the tertiary veins are really dark. And the pillowing is what creates the edges for these things. So in this case, again, the main shadows for each of these segments that divide the secondary veins, you'll see that the shadow is on the left side is going to be on the right side. Again, here it'll be on the right side. So this functions a little bit differently from the underside of the leaf. You can use this black and white photograph to tell you where things have to go. We'll start with the front first. Start with a hard pencil so that you get the graphite into the tooth of the paper. I'm going to do the blade first and leave the veins, the secondary veins and the midrib white for the time being. Ultimately, we are going to put some shadow in those, but by doing your blades first, you have a sense of how dark or light you have to make the midrib and the secondary veins. Put something under your hand while you're working and start with a 4H pencil. All right, if you're going to start with the front of the leaf, you can start with the 2H pencil and work in sections. And don't worry about putting the shading in right now. Just get a nice even application of value. When you get to a vein, you want to leave that vein white. So I've put a flat value in for this first section. And now I'm going to fill in the second section of this left blade. And I'm going to leave just the thinnest line to indicate the placement of that secondary vein. And I'm going to leave the midrib also white. Just put in nice even tones, because then you can control the shadow areas much more easily once you have your main value in for the blade. Now you can go a little darker on this. I would say probably a value of about 40, and then you can always add more if you feel that it needs to be darker. I'm not going to worry, as I say, about the tertiary veins just yet, because they will be a dark line as opposed to a light line in the process of doing this rendering. And remember, on the front side, these veins are very thin. They are like threads. So that's how thin those veins have to be. Don't overemphasize them. At this point, I have put in basically an overall flat value. As you can see, if we look at the photograph, I do not have any sculpting or dark areas indicated at all. It is strictly a flat leaf blade right now. The next step we want to do is we want to indicate each one of these major pillows. So you have major shapes that go from dark to light, separated by secondary veins, and then you have tertiary pillows. So we're going to ignore the tertiary pillows right now, and we're going to put in the shading for the major secondary veins. All along this side, on the left-hand side, we're going to have shadow that blends. On this side, we're going to have a little bit of shadow in these areas here, and it stays lighter here. So we're going to add more value to these sides. We're also going to add a little bit more shadow along the edges of these secondary veins. Now, if you look really closely at your photograph, you will see, because of the way the light hits it, that there are dark edges along these serrated edges. So we're going to add those as well. And you'll have to look at your photograph to see where they need to be put. I'm still ignoring all of these little pillows. These will be the last thing that you need to do. We're going to do these major pillows first. And I'm still working with a 2H pencil. Put in your darks and then taper them to the rest of the blade so that you have a graded tone. Now you don't want to outline, you want this to be a graded tone, so it might be dark along the edge, but then you're going to feather it into the rest of the blade so that it blends and you don't have an outline. Now as I put more darks in here, you'll see that these veins start to pop up a little bit more. So they're going to be toned back at the very end. As I say, all you're going to work on right now are the major shadows. On this side of the leaf, it goes down a little bit away from the light, so you're going to put a little bit more value on the blade that's already there. And that's going to give you some highlight or a feeling of highlight on that blade. Now remember I mentioned that you would have some dark shadows on this side. You can actually use your 4H, HB pencil to actually put some of that in. Now you don't want to do the entire thing because the light hits it in a certain way, so you're only going to put it on the long side, and on this side you're going to put a little bit of darkness on these short sections here. You need to keep adding value where you see shadows. I've been darkening in just the major sections. There's still more darkness that has to go into this area. Once that's done, then we will start to put in the tertiary veins.